I'm George Curtis. Welcome to It's Your Law. Each week it's my privilege to bring guests to you and to me that tell us a little bit about the law, how the laws are made, how they're enforced, how they're not enforced, and different people who play roles in the law. I think that my guests make it interesting, and I hope they make it interesting to you. This is a treat for me today because my guest, Jack Erkilla, was a court reporter for probably close to 40 years. And a court reporter has to be accurate. A court reporter has to be observant. A court reporter really is a camera of what goes on in the courtroom. I've always wondered what the court reporter was thinking. Today we're both going to find out. Jack, welcome to the show.
Good morning, George. Good to be here.
You came to Oshkosh, even though now you're kind of retired in Florida. You look 20 years younger than you are. You came here in part for a 90th birthday party that I'm sorry I missed because I had to attend one in the family in North Carolina. But you tell me the party went great, and Ron Bullock and I certainly hope we look like you when we're 90.
Well, okay. I'll go along with that.
All right. Well, I've known you a long time. As a court reporter, I've also played a little basketball against you and known you as a friend and had some great lunches with you, Ed Arpin, Judge Ed Arpin, I should say, and George Contos, Bailiff Contos, and unfortunately those two great people are gone. You and I are left.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me, how did you get in court reporting?
Well, it started, I was born and reared in Minneapolis, and met my wife there, married, and we got talking over the time, and all of a sudden we decided I should go back to school. But take what? Now I'm talking in 1953. A lot of people did not go to school back then. Dad worked in the factory, Grandpa worked in the factory, and you were supposed to work in the factory. Well, anyway, her brother was an attorney, later years a judge, but we were with he and his wife, and we got chatting, and the sister-in-law said she had seen the most interesting class. She was writing a thesis. And she said, it was just so interesting. I said, what was it? And said, court reporting. And I had never heard of court reporting, as half the world had never heard of court reporting. But about my brother-in-law being attorney, I said, ask around and see what you can find out. And he came back sometime later and said, talk to many court reporters. You can go anywhere in the United States and get a job. So I walked into school having no idea what I was going to do. I just happened to pick the right field that I was kind of born to do. Later, I just remember this one gal who was a student came to me and said, are you a natural? And I said, what do you mean, am I a natural? She said, I was talking to the prof, and he said, you're a natural. So I guess I was born to do that, and that's how I got into court reporting.
And how much formal education in court reporting itself was required? Is there a license involved? Do you have to?
No, you have to graduate.
I see.
You take law, you take English, you take typing, you take court reporting.
And then you look for a job.
No, they look for you.
And where was that first job?
St. Louis.
Okay.
They called and wanted me to go out there. And so I went to St. Louis, fresh out of school. I ran the office. There was no one there in St. Louis, and I had to run the office. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so we took hearings for the NLRB, National Labor Board. We took those kind of hearings.
But you had the machine.
I have the machine.
Okay. Some of the earlier court reporters still did shorthand.
Well, when I came in,
Excuse me.
really at one time the reporters wrote what was called pitman, and it was a shading. Well, then what every high school person knows, Greg came along. And of course, they wiped out the pen writer, the other writers. Anyway, so then along comes this guy who invented this machine. And they would hold a contest every year to find out who was the world's fastest writer. Well, this guy came in with his machine and blew all the pen writers out of the water. So the pen writers got so mad they quit holding the contest. And then as they went along, machine writer come in and we would replace a pen writer. I came to Oshkosh, replaced a pen writer. And then, of course, everybody was machines.
So in what year did you come to Oshkosh?
Came in 1956, January of 1956.
And who was your first judge?
Judge, it was Sam Lexinger.
Okay, I don't remember Sam.
No,
I remember Sitter.
I was with Lexinger first, then he died. Judge Miller, he was the reason I came to Oshkosh. Herb Miller was the district attorney. He ran for the county judgeship and won. And in the court I was in, they had a pen writer, but he also had a business downtown, business type business. And he would go back from his business to the court reporting. Well, Herb Miller asked him if he would come as his clerk. And he said, yes, if I don't have to take trials. And he said, that's fine. We'll get a freelancer to come in. So he went. That's why I wound up in Oshkosh.
Okay, I remember Herb Miller. He was near the end of his judgeship when I got to town. Rumor was that he had never gone to law school.
Didn't.
He worked in a gas station, somehow passed the bar. He was a good, common sense judge,
right.
And he ran a tight ship. He wasn't bashful about reprimanding the lawyers, which is a good thing because the lawyers will take every inch you give them, myself included. But
yes.
Then did you go to work for Judge Sitter?
No, then that's when I went to work for Lexinger, Judge Lexinger.
All right. Well, who was next?
Then Lexinger passed away. Judge Miller came in and substituted, and then Arnold Kane.
I remember Arnie Kane.
From Menasha. One thing about Arnie Kane, he could not hold a schedule. He wandered in all times of the day. We'd have 100 cases pending at 9 o'clock, and he'd come in at 10. And then he would talk to friends until 10:30, and then we'd go until 1:30. And of course, we're supposed to start cases at 1:30, but then you go to lunch and come back at 2:30, and then we'd go all night if we had to.
Well, hold that lunch idea. I want to have lunch with you before your summer's over, but right now we have to take a break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. I'm George Curtis. My guest is Jack Erkilla, an extraordinary court reporter and friend. Where we were with the first segment is that you'd been living in the St. Louis area. You found out about court reporting, took the course. You were a court reporter, but I didn't get to ask you, how did you get to Oshkosh?
Well, my first job was in St. Louis, and we went there, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the office, I had to go to St. Louis and run the office, and I was fresh out of school. And I had a hard time getting downtown St. Louis, let alone run the office. But anyway, I did. But this was a different time. This was in the 50s, 1955. It still seems like we were up to date then, but now we aren't. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. People didn't own a lot of cars. You took buses and streetcars and so forth. But anyway, when I was there, this one time I was taking the bus to go home or something, and I got off. Well, as I said, we didn't have cell phones. So I wrote letters back to my wife in Minneapolis until she could get out of her contract teaching to come to join me. And this one time I wrote her because I was shocked. I got off the bus and two women were standing on the corner smoking cigarettes. Women did not smoke cigarettes outside at that time.
Sure.
So that was a shock to me. Well, nobody pays attention to that today. But and another thing was, I had to take a hearing at the capital of Missouri, and I took a bus early that morning. And on the bus, there was this colored family, a husband and wife, nicely dressed, nice couple. Got off, they stopped for a break. I went into the restaurant. Coming out, I thought, oh, I didn't see that couple. Now, I lived my life in Minneapolis, and I was shocked because I walked outside and it said, whites only restaurant. And a drinking fountain said, whites only, blacks only. I had never seen that. That didn't happen in Minneapolis. They lived together. Didn't think anything about it. But anyway, so being in there, that's when I decided I wasn't caring about St. Louis much anymore. So my wife and I took the train and went back to Minneapolis. I called the prof up, said, can we meet? And we met downtown Minneapolis. And I walked in, and the prof said, how do you like St. Louis? I said, I don't. He said, I thought so. Do you want to go to Oshkosh, Wisconsin?
Oh, really?
And I said, get out a map and find out where it is. Well, it was 250 miles away. And I knew I was going to get the job because the prof was telling me. He got a call from Bert Nonweiler, who you remember, clerk of the municipal court. And he said, I want a male reporter experienced. He said, I don't have any. So he called back later and said, I want an experienced male reporter. He said, I don't have any. Called back later and said, I want a male reporter. He said, I don't have any. Although at that time, 99% of the reporters were men. Now it's 99.5% women.
Exactly.
Yeah, like a lot of the professions. But so anyway, my wife and I took the train, went back to St. Louis, closed everything down, drove back to Minneapolis, spent Christmas there, drove over to Oshkosh, arrived December 28th, 1955. And I was shocked because coming from Minneapolis, we had alleys, so that's where the garbage was put. And I drove on Jackson Street in Oshkosh, and it was garbage day, and all these garbage cans were lined up down the street. Shocked the living daylights out of me. Of course, now everybody does that, and you get used to it. So that's how I wound up. And the other thing was, we didn't know the city. We got a paper and looked for a place to live. Wound up a block and a half from the courthouse without even knowing it. And when I was in St. Louis, it would take me an hour to get to work, an hour to get home. Now it took me 2 minutes to walk to the courthouse. So it was a big change. It was a great change.
Well, I was lucky enough to be a guest at your home in Oshkosh. Big, one of the stately old homes.
Yeah. That was later. Yes.
Sure. And that's the home you were in your entire time?
No. I lived on Jackson first.
I see.
Moved out to Murdoch, and then bought a home across the street from that home, and then bought that one in 1967.
Well, it seems to me that when you were moving out of that home, you must have moved into smaller quarters, because we bought, I think, a dining room set for you from you that was real elegant in that elegant home.
We were leaving. We were retiring, and bought in Florida then, because the first couple of years I was retired, I was living here and going down for a couple of months in Florida. Then in 1998, bought in Florida and sold out up here.
Well, how many years were you court reporter for Judge Arpin?
8, 2 terms. Each judge, it's 4-year term.
It seemed to me that you, as a court reporter, Judge Arpin, and George Contos were like a finely tuned machine or watch. You worked so well together that I don't ever want a real job. I always want to go to court. A bad day in court beats a great day in the office. But it was such a delight to go there. The way you worked together, the way witnesses were treated, the way the courtroom was run, and it was so congenial that I felt that my clients, even when we got beat, yes, I lost a couple, that my clients felt that they were heard and they were treated with respect. What are your observations about that?
He loved you. He had more fun when you showed up for a pretrial or in court. And I will say this, you were probably one of the best trial lawyers I had the privilege of sitting in the courtroom with, because a good trial lawyer makes a day easier. I remember you tried a case, and there was an attorney from Milwaukee. I can't remember his name, but he too was a good trial lawyer. And I can remember that so vividly. I thought, this is the way this is the way a trial should be held with you two guys, because it was, and you didn't yell at each other. You were very kind to each other. But you knew what was going on. You knew what you could say. You knew what you couldn't say. And yeah, you were good.
Well, thank you. That's a good time for our second transition. I'm going to take a break, and we're going to talk about some of your memories and your view of whether in your period of time our justice system is really working. We'll be right back. Welcome back to It's Your Law. My guest is Jack Erkilla, a retired court reporter. He says he's 90, he looks 60, and I hope he feels 50. It's so good to have you back here. It was so good to practice in the courts where you were a court reporter, and I especially remember George Contos and Judge Arpin and the pleasure of bringing my clients there. But I want your observations, because I know you're a very astute observer, and I'd like your impressions for our audience as to, does this system work? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, like I said, I've been out for 20-some years now, but I always felt jury trials were fair. Most of the time, they came up with the right answer. Way more times than they didn't. I always had confidence in the jury trial, at least here in Winnebago County. But I had confidence in the juries. I felt they, 99% of the time here, came up with the right answer.
And what's your thought about some observation that I have made, and I probably am wrong? Very often as an attorney, you tell the client, we're on the wrong side of this one. You're probably going to lose. However, the Seventh Amendment says you have a right to a jury trial if there's more than $20 at stake. And even if there isn't, you have a right to a trial. And if you want a trial, I'm here to give you a trial. As long as you understand you're probably not going to make money, you're going to lose money. But I think it's important to so many people who don't think they're being listened to that they can say their piece. And if they hear it from a judge, they'll feel better. What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with that. I think the man who sits up there with the robe impresses. In fact, when I started in Oshkosh, they had just brought the robe back. And they said, just you give honor to the seat, not the person sitting there, but to the judgeship itself, what it stands for. And it stands for, you got a shot at it, like you just said. You come in here and we'll try to find out what really happened. I can remember one case. This was over in Chilton. That was our circuit. And we were over there, and this is before divorces were 50-50. And this woman was being railroaded. She was really being railroaded. And the judge stopped the case and said, "My chambers." And he brought the attorneys back there, and he said, "We're not going to do it this way. She's going to get this, and she's going to get this, and it's equal." And the judge saved that poor woman because, she wasn't the brightest. And so this lawyer said, "No, you can't have that." So she thought, "Oh, I can't have that." So the man in the robe, saved that woman. And of course, now it is 50-50.
Well, of course, we have a lot of competition, we lawyers do.
Yep.
People are getting their legal advice from barbers, beauticians, bartenders, and Judge Judy.
Yes.
And there seem to be law. I haven't turned on a television set for 8 or 9 years, but I'm told there are all kinds of law shows on television.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we've got all kinds of lawyers advertising, and I'm one of them. That we're going to get you $1 million
yeah.
for a hangnail. What is your view about the importance of having a lawyer representing the citizen to get a straight answer and get a fair cut and get justice?
Well, if it is a complicated case, or if it's a serious injury case, you should have a lawyer, because you can't go through the system. You have no idea what they go through, and you should have a lawyer. No question about that.
You say you've been out for 25 years. At
Right.
the same time, I know that you kind of keep track of what's going on, because every time I have the privilege of talking to you, you know what's going on, not only in the states that you live in part of the time, but in the country and in the world. What changes do you sense are going on in the justice system?
Well, of course, it's control. Right now, we're going through some chaotic times. In fact, it kind of rivals the 60s, the Vietnam War, where boys were coming back and being spit upon. People were fighting. It just so happened in the 60s, I was so busy with everything outside of the court reporting also, that I didn't watch the news that much. I got shocked later, and I thought, I didn't know that was happening. I remember the one where they had the hose on these black people and hosing them down. And I thought, I didn't even know that happened. I was so busy with other things. But that was a real chaotic time. We're in it again, and people can't agree on anything.
And of course, the unusual, if not unique, election process that we've been going through the last 4, 5, 6 years has brought out a lot of groups and people and thoughts that were concealed previously. Most of us were amazed at the number of hate groups, racially antagonistic groups, groups that feel that we should have an armed rebellion, protesters, protests that got into violence, looting, burning, and we have in the last half dozen years been exposed to some of our eczema, and realized that while out of one side of our mouth we say "Make America Great Again" or "Make America Great," on the other side we realize that if we weren't born Caucasian from a family with fair success to give us opportunity, it never was great.
No.
This is a time to recognize that the reality is that the ideal of making America great for everyone that's here is still way out of reach for
Way
a
out
lot
of
of
reach.
people.
Yes, it is, and it reminds me so much. Like I said, being brought up in Minneapolis, I can remember. It's a long story. I'll just tell how it ended. I had to walk from way north Minneapolis to way south Minneapolis at 2 o'clock in the morning, and had to walk through downtown Minneapolis and so forth. I had no concern. I never thought of anything. Was I scared? No, not at all. I had absolutely no fear. Today, you wouldn't walk there. Any city, big cities, you wouldn't walk there, especially at 2 in the morning. But that's the way my childhood was, or my I was, growing up. And I look at it today and I say, that was a nice time. That was a nice quiet time. You went out and played until Mom said, "Get in here, it's time to go to bed." And then you went in the house. And we were poor. I mean, we were poor. But I didn't know we were poor. As long as Mom was there, everything was safe.
Well, you don't know you're poor if you don't know you're poor.
That's true. That's
Jack,
true.
we're out of time. This has been a delight.
Okay.
I hope you come back next summer and we do it again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Yeah.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to have Jack Erkilla on this show. I've always respected him, admired him, and looked forward to working with him in the justice system. As you can tell, he's a very smart, observant man. I'm going to pick up on one of his observations. Juries usually get it right. Keep that in mind. The jury system usually gets it right. Don't give up the jury system because we need to get it right. I'm George Curtis, and that's my opinion.